Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev, where it's a new year, which means new projects. Now, 2020, I spent a lot of time trying to think of new ways to make a snake-style game, and while we started down some interesting paths, I felt that with GameMaker's 2.3 update came the opportunity to branch out and do something different. Which brings us to the project we'll begin working on today. We'll be creating a game inspired by Snake's gameplay. However, the goal will be to cover every space of the play area while avoiding oncoming dangers. And don't worry if you're confused, because today we'll focus on building the basics of that concept. That's the plan anyway, so let's not waste any more time and get to the coding. First up, we were going to need a few visual assets, including a bubble and a grid. The grid to help keep track of our play area, and the bubble will be needed later. With those sprites done, it was on to the code. Variables for our grid were added to our HUD object, which would generate our play area. The grid cells were defaulted to 0, and then that grid was drawn to the level. A lot of extra math was used here because I'm hoping to make this grid generate dynamically, so that no matter how large the play area gets, it will always originate from the middle of the room and generate outwards. Eventually, I was able to work it out, and thus our grid was now ready for action. First, all that math was made official via variables and macros for future use, which was then used to restrict player positioning to remain within the grid. And next, it was time for that bubble. An instance check for a bubble was made, and if one doesn't exist, it was created in a random cell within the play area. And thanks to those variables and macros, this was easy to set up. I also want to take this moment to just mention that originally, this was going to be a game about a brush who used their butt to paint a canvas. I only changed it to a squid last minute because I was afraid YouTube would deem a brush with a bristle booty to be a violation of some sort. Anyway, with that working, it was time to move on. In the collision event for squid to bubble, an ink variable would be updated and the bubble would be destroyed. An extra image was then added to the grid sprite to keep track of the cell states. Then in the squid object, a new function was created to return its position within the grid. And to test this, I drew the value of the grid to the screen. The test showed this to be working, however, I for some reason took the 0 to mean the function was broken. So I ended up spending an extra 10 minutes or so assuming my math was wrong, only to realize my foolishness. So anyway, another function was added to the squid, this time switching the value for the nearest cell to the squid's position to 1. The function would also remove 1 point from the ink variable. The test showed both functions working properly, with the squid now being able to manipulate the grid data as long as it had quote-unquote ink, which in turn could be replenished by touching the bubbles spawning randomly on the board. This hopefully gives you a better idea of what we're going for with this project. Nothing too crazy and actually pretty old school in nature. It's a take on Snake that's not a direct copy, but shares a similar goal, and while a good start, it could still use some improvements. So back to the code, a spacebar check was added to the ink code. This felt better to control as it gives player agency to ink when they want, versus inking whenever as if they were leaking. And agency seemed pretty important given what was coming up next. Next up was our danger, the shark. Sharks would need destination variables as their main purpose would be to randomly patrol the play area. So a function to continuously update the shark's destination coordinates was created. Then to start, I had the shark move towards their destination using some basic math. I liked the way that the shark would ease towards its destination, however the movement was far too quick and abrupt. And even slowing the shark's movement speed down still wasn't organic enough. So the destination function was broken up into 2 parts, and instead I moved on to a distance-based method of handling movement, which would work similar to the tractor code from our most recent holiday special. So the shark would slowly turn towards its destination point. That would dictate the position of the shark, thus creating far more organic movement. And as a side effect, it would also make dealing with the sharks as a danger much easier. So instead of ninja sharks dashing all over the place, we had menacing dangers simply lurking and waiting to prey on a little squid trying to spray its ink everywhere. Look, I originally wanted to call this game Brush Booty, okay? I was prepared for Brush Booty, not Squid Squirter. But anyway, this was a good start. Again, it's quite old school in that the mechanics are very straightforward, though I'm thinking of ways to add to the difficulty that's not just add more sharks. So we'll see what happens next time. Also, I'm totally planning to add actual ink blots in, but I just didn't have the time this episode. So with that said, wraps up the first episode in our Not Brush Booty project, and I'm excited to hopefully work on something smaller and more basic in scale, at least compared to the other projects we've got going on right now. So leave a like if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and be sure to leave your thoughts on our Squid Squirter game in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.